What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the channel. I'm LotusAsakura, the one who never knows best, and in today's video I'm bringing you another discussion video joined by a very special guest who you're all familiar with at this point. I'm sure you know him, you love him. None other than PhiDX. Say what's good to the people.
Hello.
Yeah, so today I'm having PhiDX join me because I figured, in my opinion, there was an interesting conversation to be had, and this isn't meant to be like particularly insightful or anything, as I don't feel like I have anything profound to really offer. I just kind of wanted to talk about it and get some of my own thoughts and opinions out there, because this is a conversation that I've been seeing had on Twitter since EVO made this announcement about a week ago now. So if I go over to the monitor right now, you'll see that in Vegas, EVO made the announcement that there will be several new additions to the EVO lineup. Next year in 2025, there will be an EVO LA, an EVO in Tokyo, which we've already been having EVO Japan. There's obviously going to be EVO Las Vegas, and then there's also going to be an EVO in, I believe they pronounce it Nice, which is in France in October. Also, they mentioned that in 2026, there will be an EVO in Singapore. And basically, this is all very hype and very exciting news, but there's been an ongoing conversation and debate about whether or not this is a good thing, it's a bad thing, if it's watering down the EVO brand, if it's strengthening the EVO brand, and basically everything in between. So I brought Phi here today to discuss it with me and kind of get his opinion, and also kind of give my opinion as well, just because I figured it would be fun to talk about. So I'll go ahead and let you have that floor first. Do you have any opinions about EVO expanding in this way and adding in all these other stops and damn near creating like their own circuit or own tour?
Yeah, my initial reaction was that it would be, like a dilution of the prestige of EVO, right? That was definitely my first take. And then I heard some more people talk about it. My opinion started to change. You know, like there are 4 tennis Grand Slams every year. So like there's already precedent for a very prestigious title that is spread out across 4 tournaments, right? And I think that we already have kind of a precedent of like someone saying EVO Japan champion, EVO champion. I think if EVO Vegas remains titled EVO, that would make a lot of sense just historically. But I think all in all, it's ultimately a good thing. I think that European players having more access to it. Vegas is so expensive that it's like prohibitive. So like having EVO France makes a lot of sense, and likewise for Southeast Asia, having EVO Singapore makes a lot of sense. And I think that you'll get to see different qualities of play, as well as the, like, if people are less taxed when traveling, things like that. Like everybody's nerfed in tournament, right? So it would be interesting to see how good each region really is on their, like, you know, close to home turf, right?
Yeah, I don't really know if I have strong opinions one way or the other about whether it's a good or bad thing. I see both sides, and I've thought a lot about it. I actually hadn't heard or saw the comparisons to like Grand Slams. I did see that I believe Mena, the Street Fighter player, compared it to like boxing, where they have, you know, multiple different belts for boxing. And I think that's a pretty good analogy as well, because I know Damascus made a tweet, and I wish he hadn't deleted it, because I actually have some tweets here pulled up that I want to show you guys and that we can discuss as well, as you can see with these tabs I have open up there. But Damascus made a tweet that like sparked a lot of conversation, but he unfortunately deleted the tweet, and so some of the replies and stuff are still there, but like finding them was a bit scattered and hard to do. But I like the idea of just having more events, especially because, you know, after the pandemic, we lost like a lot of like regionals and just tournaments in general, locals and everything like that. So I think that if EVO, the biggest, you know, championship series or just like tournament in the world, is able to add more events, I think it's just better for the community. But we did have tweets from people such as this one right here, who hopefully no one minds me putting their name on blast. I'm not antagonizing or attacking any of these guys, but I just thought that these were good tweets. And this is like one of the ones that I you know, mentioned, where Filipino man said, to be honest, EVO is really diluting their brand power by having multiple tournaments. Are we really going to call the winner of EVO France, EVO Singapore, EVO Japan all EVO champions? Yes, they're going to be tough tournaments, but that's 4 new champions yearly. And as Phi said, we already have a precedent for this, like in other sports, and obviously there's always a comparison between esports and then quote unquote real sports, or more traditional sports, I think is a better term for it. I don't really care to get into the debate about whether or not playing video games is a real sport. It really doesn't matter to me. But I definitely understand the sentiment. I think for one, they probably will just call EVO Las Vegas like EVO. Like that will still be looked at as the most prestigious, the most elite tournament, the the title to win. You know what I mean? Even if you have these other events, I think people are still going to look at that one as the biggest one, and it probably still will end up being the biggest event every single year. And I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I'm of the opinion, and I believe a lot of people are probably of the opinion, that EVO in Vegas is more prestigious, or like, you know, means more, carries more weight, is a bigger accolade than winning any other event, including EVO Japan. Like, even though EVO Japan is still EVO, and that definitely means something, it carries a lot of weight, people look at the Vegas title as a bigger title. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so Oh, go on.
Oh yeah, and I was just pulling up Speedkick's tweet I was looking at. He said,
I have this full of here too.
yeah. Sorry,
because he quoted Filipino man.
Yeah. Well, he was saying, I think they're actually strengthening their brand power by running all the largest tournaments in the world. Yes, what it means to be an EVO champion will change, but it will still be the most important title, and we'll be fighting 4 times a year for it. And I think that is one of the alternate takes that started to shift my perspective. I was like, well, is it going to be gigantic EVO and then 3 lesser EVOs, or are they all going to be 4 lesser EVOs? And right now, I think it's hard to tell, but what's undoubtable is that it will still be EVO, right? Like, it's still going to be that major. And I think it'll be a cool way to structure it, because right now I think that the branding around international tournaments is a little weird. Like, unless you're in the know, it's hard to know what is the like premier European major, what is the premier like Southeast Asia major, right? But if it has that EVO name, it's very easy to be like, yeah, go to this one, yeah, go to this one. And
I would say, even for someone like myself, who I would consider pretty in the know and invested in the community, it can be hard to keep up with a lot of events. Like, all the time when I restream and watch events, people are like, I had no idea this tournament was happening, or I wouldn't have even known about this if you weren't streaming it. So I definitely feel that.
Yeah, I think having the the skill level of the organizers of EVO is very beneficial for the other regions as well. And that's not to like talk down on like the other organizers, of course. Like,
not at all.
We don't have the community without them, but
everyone's working really hard to run these events.
Yeah, EVO just has the manpower, they have the resources, and they have the experience to really, I think, deliver a good experience or correct a previous bad experience, right? Like, people have been complaining about the arena experience of EVO 2024. I think a lot of people also have confidence that the people behind EVO will be very quick to fix that for next. So I think it's ultimately a beneficial thing, especially because EVO, despite how big it is probably still one of the most community connected FGC things out there, right? Like, especially if you compare to like EWC or say like the Olympics voting to bring in esports. I think undoubtedly EVO will be the most prestigious and most like grassroots connected event, right? Like, they still rely on community members so much for what they do.
So I have a question for you, and obviously we don't know how this is going to pan out, right? We'll only know once it happens. Do you feel as though EVO expanding in this way could possibly be harmful to some of the smaller events that exist, where people are like, well, why would I go to? Because obviously events like Combo Breaker and CEO, which are like 2 of the other big ones that, outlived everything else and are still around, like they're probably still going to be fine, right? But I would imagine that there might be some other events where people are like, I'm kind of going to skip out on this one. I'll just go to EVO, because there's going to be EVO here in a couple of months. There's going to be, because like, even though there's going to be ones in other countries, well, yeah, I guess that matters too, because you have people in the States who be like, well, there's going to be one in LA, there's going to be one in Vegas, there's going to be one here. I'll just go to this event in a couple of months, as opposed to like spreading myself out between all these smaller events or going here or there. And also EVO's EVO, so it's going to be bigger, it's going to be better, it might be more value for the money that you're going to spend. It's going to be expensive regardless, but again, as you just explained, like EVO has manpower, the resources and everything like that, so it kind of might overshadow some other events. And then likewise for people internationally, is like, well, I'm not going to travel all the way to even Vegas, or I'm not going to travel all the way to here or there, because there's going to be one in my country or in a country much closer to mine here in a few months, so I'll just save them and go to that one. Could you see that maybe negatively impacting some of the other events?
I think that's a very real possibility. I think it's going to depend on scheduling. There's certainly a precedent of like international players coming for, say, Combo Breaker and DreamHack Dallas, or other majors that are kind of stacked close together. They will they will make sure that they have allocated the time to go to both, right? And I think that's a possibility. Say if they have EVO Singapore and another Southeast Asian tournament within a close proximity, then you could go to both. I think that that will very much depend on the scheduling. It'll depend on like how the Tekken World Tour is structured. There'll be a lot of moving parts before it definitively says like, yeah, people will just pick the EVO. Yeah, I think it's hard to say. I think it's a very real concern though. It's certainly a thing with like locals. Like, there are scenes that have so many locals that people will just pick the one that's comfortable for them.
Right.
And the overall scene has like less, like every local has less attendance because they're all like cannibalizing each other, right?
Man, what a first world problem to have, by the way, because I don't really have locals, and I search every so often for locals in my area, and the closest one I've ever found was multiple hours away, and it doesn't even get ran on a very, very regular basis, so I've never been. But yeah, but even that being said, like, there's a lot of locals that don't even just exist anymore. Like, again, like, pandemic kind of like chopped a lot of people's ankles, but Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is such an interesting problem to have as somebody who also historically prior to moving didn't really have a local scene. So like it's weird, and I don't know if it scales up the same way, right? Like certainly at least a Westerner, I think, going to Southeast Asia may have more incentive to stay longer, may have more resources to stay longer, depending on like, you know, the power of their currency. So it depends. And obviously it would be way worse if it ends up eating up those smaller events, but I feel like EVO will account for that. I feel like they act generally in pretty good faith. So
I would like to believe the same. Obviously I don't put anyone past, I don't put anything past anyone. I don't like to put too much blind faith into people, but I've been given no prior reason to believe that there'd be any sort of like negative or ulterior motive or anything like that. And I obviously don't imagine that they're trying to overthrow or overshadow any smaller events. And then you make a good point too, because like when I think about like some of the international players who like I'm familiar with, like I oftentimes will see them like have an extended stay here in the States because I'm flying in for this event, and then this event's like a couple of days later, or like the next weekend, or like 2 weeks later, whatever. So I'll just stay here for a few weeks and attend like these multiple events. That is a very regular thing. A question I want to ask you is, kind of touching back on like the weight of some of these events. I am of the belief or the opinion that most people, and I think even myself, kind of feel this way, that EVO as a title, when it comes to like prestige and diluting it or whatever, like what an EVO title means, I think that's even bigger than winning like the World Tour Championships of most games, if not all games. Like I think when people think about like the greatest fighting game players of all time, or like who's the best player in the world at that game, like yeah, because they're normally so far apart, because like you don't have EVO and then like next week is TWC finals, or like next week is Capcom Cup, you know what I mean? So there's usually some distance between it, so you can say, well, this is the best player in the world right now. But I feel like the vibe I get is that people kind of consider whoever wins EVO probably the better player than whoever wins the World Tour for their respective game, or that status, that prestige, that title, they kind of get to hold on to longer, or you know what I'm saying, kind of flex a little bit more. Do you feel the same way? Do you get that vibe? Do you disagree?
I didn't start thinking about it until you said it, but I actually kind of agree now, because I think there's so many format issues with the World Tours. They're all structured differently. It's sometimes really hard to understand. There's like often like very public complaints from people about how the formats are structured, whereas EVO is just an open bracket. It's the easiest to understand. It's everybody has an equal chance in that moment, you know?
Right.
So I think that might be part of the reason why it feels more prestigious, is it's very easy to understand. It's like, yeah, they won the tournament. A lot of people go.
Right. There were 7,000 people here. He won it. It's that simple.
Yeah. And then as a player myself, I have a lot of respect for EVO winners, because the logistics and mental and physical tax of being in Vegas at such a large event where it's almost more of a convention than a tournament. Being a top player and managing all of those things is insane. Like that is actually so impressive to me as someone who is really bad at just even sleeping at a tournament in my own home country, you know, versus traveling across the world, getting good enough sleep, managing your nutrition. Like if you eat halal food only, how do you find what to eat in Las Vegas, right? Or like how do you know where to go? Like what if you don't speak the language? Like all of these challenges that these players are able to still play nasty Tekken on top of is so impressive. So EVO has that extra prestige in my mind just because of those factors.
Yeah, there was a tweet that came out from Mena that I also wanted to take a look at, where he said, personally, I consider both the tour finals for their respective games, such as Capcom Cup and TWT, and EVO as world championships. But I also feel like if you agree on EVO Las Vegas being a world championship, EVO Japan, France, and Singapore also is. And I don't think I disagree with that. Like I said, I think those events, in terms of size, will obviously, well, I can't necessarily say obviously, I guess we won't really know until we know, but I would assume EVO Vegas will still be the biggest out of those, and the other ones, I don't want to say will pale in comparison, but probably won't have the same level of attendance. I do think that with the addition of these extra events in other regions, EVO Vegas might have seen its peak in terms of attendance, or maybe this strengthens the brand even more, and EVO just becomes this bigger thing where it's just like, yeah, like, hey, here's your EVO in your area, pull up. But I would imagine that we might see EVO Vegas not be as big as it was these last 2 years next year, and then you see it a bit more spread out, but who knows for sure. But I do think that, and again, like, I think the attendance probably is the biggest reason for this, on top of everything else, like you just mentioned, like all these other obstacles that you face when you're going to these events, whether it's a language barrier, whether it's your diet or getting proper sleep, jet lag, whatever the case is. But I still feel like those other EVOs aren't quite on the same level as Vegas, but that might change in time depending on how things pan out. And do you think we could see a world where one of the other events or one of the other regions becomes bigger than what EVO Vegas is, or matches it?
I don't think bigger, but I do think they may level out. Like maybe EVO France ends up having similar attendance to Vegas, or EVO Singapore has similar attendance. Like because of the reduction in attendance at Vegas, maybe it becomes more equal.
Right.
But it's really hard to say. I think that I do agree that with that announcement, it becomes likely that Vegas has hit its peak. But I think that's almost kind of a good thing. Like it was so busy this time and last time that I think logistically managing it is becoming an insane challenge, right? So I almost think I'm leaning towards that being a good thing, but who knows?
So I tried to find obviously like some of the replies and things that like Damascus makes. I say because he sparked a lot of good conversation when he made his original tweet. But then he followed up with a thread where after he mentioned that he deleted the tweet, says, all right, it was a fun chat with everyone, deleted the tweet, saved my mentions, but it was cool to discuss the value for everyone. And then he mentioned how like Meta compared it to boxing belts and that it was a really refreshing way of looking at it. And then he also went on to say, very interesting to learn that there are more sports than I thought that hold legacy prestigious event at a higher value than World Finals. Today I learned there was a cyclism World Finals, which is news to me as well. I say only sport I really follow super closely outside of esports, I guess, is basketball. That's my thing. I'm really into basketball. But really enjoying the Paris Olympics right now, by the way. Also, in the description you might find a channel where I talk a little bit about basketball here or there. Anyway, quick plug. But he asked a question. He said, all in all, I think it's a cool debate to have. What is the criteria for being a world champion? Is it size, attendance, length of the format? My default answer is length, qualifying events in the world finals, but it's not the most common one either. And I wanted to ask, what do you think it is? What is the criteria for being a world champion? What's the biggest factor into that event? Is it the attendance, the size, the length of the format? How do you feel about that?
I think it's the strength of the competition. I think that having the as many world-class players as you can, fighting within a reasonable format. So yeah, format definitely matters. Is crucial. I think that that is probably why EVO has seemed so prestigious for so long, is because everybody's there, right? Or within everybody that you can think of. Like if somebody doesn't attend EVO, it's usually hard to tell because of how many strong players are there, right? So to me, that has always been the defining trait, is like you are seeing most of the strongest players that you can imagine or compete with or like dream against playing against, right? There's no conversation of like, well, if this guy were there, it would have been different, right? Because they're all there, right? So I think that's why it's usually a world title. And I think when it comes to like, say, Tekken World Tour Finals, the reason why that question doesn't necessarily show up as much is because it's over an extended period of time and everybody who's you would expect to be in contention has had a shot. Right. So I think that is probably the key factor.
So it's funny that he asked this question and that you answered it the way that you did, because this is actually a conversation that has come up in the world of sports, and particularly with basketball recently. There is an American track and field star by the name of Noah Lyles. I don't know if you're familiar with him or if you ever saw this quote come out, but basically he was criticizing the NBA because he was like, he wasn't a fan of the fact that whoever wins, the NBA finals calls themselves a world champion. You said that you feel as though the strength of the competition is what determines it being a world champion. Obviously, the NBA is predominantly American players, but it is an international sport, and you have players from all over the world who are in the NBA. And in fact, some of the best players in the league right now, in my opinion, 2 of the top 3 players are not. I would say the top 3, 4. It's a debate. In the top 5, there are multiple players who are international. Nikola Jokic is from Serbia. You have Luka Doncic, who's from Slovenia. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's from Greece. Joel Embiid, who's from France. Even though he's playing for Team USA right now in the Olympics. But that's another conversation. But basically, you have the best of the best of the best from all over the world in the NBA. So even though you're not necessarily playing against every country like you're doing right now in the Olympics, if you're a basketball player from a country and you're one of the best in the world, you're either in the NBA or trying to get into the NBA, and for good reason. And so there was a debate about whether or not players in the NBA should be considered as world champions because they're competing against each other as opposed to teams all over the world like you do in the Olympics. And I'm kind of on the side of like, well, if you're good enough, you're in the NBA. Like the best players in the world are here. So I kind of look at this world championship. I think there is weight to the argument that you're not playing against literally every other country in the world, but I don't know. I think he had a point. I also think Noah Lyles is a bit of a cornball. That's just me. That's my personal opinion. That's just a little side. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, I think that makes sense. Like when I think of the NBA, like, you know, they have international representation. Like, and I'm the one thing that I am not familiar with is how accessible it is for players internationally to get discovered and show up in the NBA. Mm-hmm. But I've always felt like it is the scene where there are the strongest players, right? So that debate is probably more interesting than the Tekken one, where you see so many international players. So it's very obvious, right? But probably comparable is like Super Smash Bros. Melee, which is so like USA dominated,
right?
Except for a few outliers from Sweden, and then I'm out of date. So this is my information from say like
I'm
2014 to 2018.
I hardly know anything outside of Leffen, so
I'm sure there are tons of like really strong international players now. But when I was watching Melee, it was like, oh, it was Armada and Leffen from Sweden, and then mostly USA players, right? So like from that perspective, it's like, is like, there's the infrastructure of the game, like there's the size of the scene, there's so many questions. So I think boiling it down to strength of competition has always felt the easiest for me, because in the cases where there's like a sleeper insane player who really just can't get anywhere feels rare. But maybe that's my USA bias, right? So it's hard to give a definitive answer, but
right.
That's the best answer I could give at this time, is like, yeah, you know, you're seeing where the best players are, so why don't we look there?
Got it. Yeah, all in all, I think I don't think the point of this video was to try to come up with any sort of definitive answer about what's right, what's wrong, or what's really going to happen. I just thought it would be fun to converse with you about and just kind of just have a little bit of a discussion. Because like I said, I wanted to talk about it, and I thought it would be more fun and more enjoyable if I had on a guest. By the way, I forgot to mention in the introduction, but not only is our guest an esteemed Tekken player and coach, streamer, content creator, superstar extraordinaire himself, he's also recently engaged.
Yes.
And congratulations, Vid Dog. I'm happy for you, man. Wishing you and yours the best of the best. But thank you so much for joining me here today. I think that'll about do it for the discussion. Also, I see, I suppose that's the fiance off screen right now, waving to the camera. Hello. Yeah. But yeah, I appreciate you for joining me here today. Do you have any like closing remarks or statements you'd like to add on before we wrap up here?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Tekken has always felt a lot like tennis to me, in the 1v1 aspect and the player personality aspect and like the regional pride. So I'm biased in thinking that it's probably going to look like the EVO split might look like how tennis Grand Slams look. I'm hopeful, because I think more events mean more opportunity. And of all the brands that are running these tournaments, I probably trust EVO the most to handle it. But it is certainly a big question mark. And I would say, what would be interesting if, you know, it shakes up that like there's so much divided attendance that if, say, I think EVO LA is supposed to be an award show, if they turn that also into like an invitational for EVO champs to decide who's the best, that might be a lot of hype, right?
Oh, that'd be kind of sick, actually.
So that might be an answer to the divided attendance.
That might be kind of fire. I like the way you think. Well, that's going to do it for us today, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this in the comment section down below. Hit this video with a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you haven't already, so you can stay tuned for all of the awesome content I plan on bringing you. With all that being said, that's pretty much all I have for today. Remember, nothing can happen until you swing the bat. Later.